Did you know that one of the scariest movies ever made was filmed in less than 3 weeks? That's right. The entire production of Invasion of the Body Snatchers wrapped in just 19 days. But what happened during those 19 days created a film that still haunts audiences nearly 70 years later. Giant alien pods, emotionless copies of your neighbors, the terror of losing yourself while you sleep. This wasn't just science fiction. This was a mirror held up to America's deepest fears. Let's dive in and discover 20 weird and amazing facts about Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Number 20. The movie almost never got made. Before the cameras rolled, Invasion of the Body Snatchers was almost a forgotten idea sitting in a drawer. The story started as a serial in Collier's magazine, written by Jack Finney in 1954. It told the tale of alien seed pods that grew perfect copies of humans while the originals slept. Creepy, right? But Hollywood wasn't immediately interested. Science fiction films at the time were often seen as cheap entertainment for teenagers. Studios wanted monster movies with big rubber creatures stomping through cities. They wanted flying saucers shooting lasers. They didn't want a quiet story about paranoia in a small town. Producer Walter Wanger saw something different. He had just survived a scandal that nearly destroyed his career. He was looking for a project that could rebuild his reputation without costing a fortune. When he read Finney's story, he felt something click. This wasn't about monsters. This was about fear itself. The fear that the people you love might not really be themselves anymore. Wanger convinced Allied artists to take a chance on the project, but they gave him almost no money. The budget was tiny, somewhere around $350,000 to $400,000. That's nothing compared to the big studio pictures of that era. Wanger had to make every penny count. He hired a director known for working fast and cheap. He cast actors who were talented but not expensive. He chose locations close to the studio to save on travel. Every decision was about survival. And somehow, that desperation became the film's secret weapon. The fear of running out of money matched the fear in the story itself. What started as a rejected idea became a classic. Sometimes the best movies come from the tightest corners. Number 19. Director Don Siegel was the perfect underdog. Don Siegel was not a famous director in 1955. He had been making movies for years, mostly B pictures that played as second features in double bills. He was fast, he was efficient, and he didn't complain about small budgets. That made him exactly what Walter Wanger needed. But Siegel brought something else to the project, a dark vision. He understood that the scariest things aren't always the monsters you can see. Sometimes the scariest thing is the look in someone's eyes. That moment when you realize your wife, your friend, your neighbor isn't quite right anymore. Siegel had grown up in the studio system, learning his craft as an editor and montage director at Warner Brothers. He knew how to tell a story with images, not just words. He knew how to create tension through pacing and shadows. When he read Daniel Mainwaring's screenplay, he saw the opportunity to make something special. He didn't want cheap thrills. He wanted genuine dread. Siegel pushed his actors to play their scenes with intensity. He wanted real sweat on their faces, real exhaustion in their voices. He filmed many scenes in a single take, forcing everyone to stay sharp. There was no time for mistakes, no money for reshoots. That pressure created an atmosphere on set that bled into the film itself. Siegel would go on to direct many famous movies, including Dirty Harry in 1971. But he always said Invasion of the Body Snatchers was one of his favorites. It was the film where he proved what he could do with almost nothing. The underdog became a legend. And it all started with seed pods from outer space. Number 18. Kevin McCarthy fought hard to play the lead. Kevin McCarthy wasn't the studio's first choice for Dr. Miles Bennell. He was a stage actor, known for his work in theater more than film. Hollywood executives wanted someone more traditionally handsome, more obviously heroic. But McCarthy wanted this role badly. He understood something about Miles Bennell that others missed. Miles wasn't a square-jawed action hero. He was an ordinary man facing impossible circumstances. He was a small-town doctor, not a soldier or a scientist. His strength came from his humanity, not his muscles. McCarthy met with Don Siegel and made his case. He talked about the terror of watching your community change, the horror of being the only one who sees the truth. Siegel was impressed. He saw in McCarthy the kind of desperate energy the film needed. When McCarthy finally got the part, he threw himself into it completely. He did his own stunts whenever possible. He ran through real streets at night. He crawled through dirt and sweat in take after take. There's a famous scene where Miles runs down a highway, screaming at passing cars to stop. The drivers in those cars weren't actors. They were real people on a real road. McCarthy was genuinely exhausted during that scene. His voice was hoarse. His legs were tired. That wasn't performance. That was reality bleeding through. Years later, McCarthy would appear in the 1978 remake, running down another highway, still screaming his warning. Some actors get one iconic role. McCarthy earned his twice. The ordinary man who wouldn't give up, the voice crying out in the darkness. Number 17. Dana Wynter brought elegance to terror. Dana Wynter played Becky Driscoll, the woman Miles loves and desperately tries to save. She brought something unexpected to the role, British sophistication mixed with genuine vulnerability. Wynter was born in Germany, raised in England, and trained as an actress in London. She had a grace that seemed out of place in a low-budget science fiction movie. But that contrast worked beautifully. Becky wasn't supposed to be a screaming damsel. She was intelligent, resourceful, and deeply in love. Wynter and McCarthy developed real chemistry on set. Their romance felt authentic because they worked so hard to make it feel real. The scenes where they hide together, exhausted and terrified, have a quiet intimacy that grounds the entire film. When Becky finally succumbs to the pods, it's devastating. Not because of special effects or dramatic music, because we've watched these two people fight so hard together. Wynter played the transformation with heartbreaking subtlety. One moment, she's the woman Miles loves. The next moment, she's something else entirely. Her eyes go empty. Her voice loses its warmth. Siegel filmed her face in close-up, and you can see the exact instant when Becky disappears. Wynter later said those scenes were emotionally draining to film. She had to imagine losing everything that made her human. That emotional truth shows on screen. What could have been a simple horror scene became something tragic. The beautiful woman became the monster. And that was more frightening than any rubber creature. Number 16. The pods were a production nightmare. Creating the alien pods was one of the biggest challenges the production faced. These weren't just props in the background. They were central to the entire story. The pods had to look organic and alien. They had to be big enough to hold a human body, and they had to open dramatically to reveal the duplicates inside. The special effects team had almost no budget to work with. They couldn't afford expensive materials or elaborate mechanisms. So they got creative. The pods were made from a combination of latex, cotton, and other cheap materials molded over wire frames. The texture was designed to look like giant seed husks, slippery and slightly disgusting. Getting them to open on camera was tricky. Some pods were pre-cut so they would split apart when pulled from behind. Others had simple mechanical hinges hidden inside. The actors inside had to hold very still while the pods were positioned around them. Then, on cue, they would emerge covered in a slimy substance meant to look like birth fluid. It was uncomfortable and messy. But it looked incredible on screen. The pods managed to be both beautiful and horrifying at the same time. They represented nature gone wrong, life that wasn't really alive. Don Siegel was smart about how he filmed them. He used shadows and low angles to make the pods seem larger and more menacing. He didn't show them in full light until the audience was already terrified. Simple tricks. Powerful results. Those handmade pods became one of the most memorable images in science fiction history. Number 15. The town of Santa Mira was actually Sierra Madre. The fictional town of Santa Mira, California, where the invasion takes place, was actually filmed in Sierra Madre. This small community northeast of Los Angeles had exactly the look Don Siegel wanted. Tree-lined streets, charming houses with white picket fences, the kind of place where everyone knows their neighbors. It was classic small-town America, which made the horror even more effective. Siegel and his crew filmed throughout the real town, using actual locations instead of expensive studio sets. Miles Bennell's office was a real building. The town square was Sierra Madre's actual downtown. Local residents watched curiously as film crews set up their equipment. Some even appeared as extras in crowd scenes. This decision saved money, but it did something more important. It made the movie feel real. When you watch Invasion of the Body Snatchers, you're not looking at obvious sound stages with painted backdrops. You're seeing a genuine American town. That authenticity made the invasion feel like it could happen anywhere. Your town, your street, your house. The people of Sierra Madre were generally cooperative, but night shoots caused some complaints. The crew had to film many scenes after dark when the streets were empty. Lights and generators ran for hours. But in the end, Sierra Madre's sacrifice created one of cinema's most convincing small towns. Every time you see those quiet streets, remember, they're real. And somewhere out there, they're still standing, waiting. Number 14. The film was shot in record time. 19 days. That's all the time Don Siegel had to complete principal photography. 19 days to capture an entire alien invasion. By Hollywood standards, this was impossibly fast. Most films of similar scope took 6 weeks or longer. But the budget demanded speed, and Siegel delivered. Every morning, the cast and crew arrived, knowing there was no room for error. Scenes were carefully planned in advance. Camera setups were kept simple whenever possible. Actors memorized their lines perfectly because there wasn't time for multiple takes. The pressure was intense, but it also created incredible energy. Everyone on set understood they were making something special under impossible conditions. Siegel was a master at shooting quickly, without sacrificing quality. He had learned the skill making B-movies where time was always the enemy. He knew exactly where to place the camera. He knew which shots were essential and which could be cut. He trusted his actors to deliver performances without endless rehearsals. Kevin McCarthy later recalled the exhausting schedule with a mixture of pride and disbelief. They would shoot for 12 or 14 hours, grab a few hours of sleep, then return for another marathon day. By the end, everyone was running on adrenaline and coffee. But that exhaustion contributed to the film's atmosphere. The characters were supposed to be tired and scared. The actors genuinely were. 19 days of chaos produced 90 minutes of terror. Speed became strength. Number 13. Sam Peckinpah had a secret role. Before Sam Peckinpah became one of Hollywood's most controversial directors, he had a small part in Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Peckinpah was working as a dialogue coach and assistant on the production. He helped actors refine their lines and rehearse their scenes. But he also appeared on camera as Charlie, a meter reader who delivers one of the film's key lines. It's a brief appearance, easy to miss if you're not looking. Charlie encounters Miles and notices something strange about a neighborhood dog. This moment adds to the building paranoia that something is terribly wrong in Santa Mira. Peckinpah wasn't a trained actor, but he delivered his lines with natural conviction. Don Siegel appreciated his enthusiasm and gave him the small role as a reward for his hard work behind the scenes. Years later, Peckinpah would become famous for violent, groundbreaking westerns like The Wild Bunch in 1969. He developed a reputation as a difficult genius who clashed with studios and pushed boundaries. But in 1955, he was just a young man learning his craft on a tight budget. His connection to Invasion of the Body Snatchers shows how small the film world can be. Today's assistant becomes tomorrow's legend. One small role in one small movie. A future giant hiding in plain sight. Number 12. The ending caused a major battle. The original ending of Invasion of the Body Snatchers was much darker than what audiences finally saw. Don Siegel wanted the film to end with Miles Bennell alone on the highway, screaming at passing cars that wouldn't stop. The invasion would succeed. Humanity would lose. The pod people would win. It was bleak, hopeless, and absolutely terrifying. But the studio executives at Allied Artists were horrified. They couldn't release a film where the monsters won. American audiences in the 1950s expected happy endings. Good was supposed to triumph over evil. A movie without hope would be too depressing, too disturbing. They demanded changes. After much argument, a compromise was reached. A framing device was added at the beginning and end of the film. Now the story opens with Miles in a hospital, telling his incredible story to skeptical doctors. At the end, after his highway breakdown, we learn that authorities have discovered evidence of the pods. Help is coming. The invasion might be stopped. Siegel hated this change. He felt it softened the film's impact and betrayed its message. But he had no power to resist the studio's demands. Many critics and fans agree with Siegel. The added scenes feel tacked on, less visually interesting than the rest of the film. Yet the movie succeeded anyway. Perhaps audiences needed that small hope to handle the darkness that came before. Or perhaps the film's power was simply too strong to be weakened by a few extra minutes. The battle over the ending became part of the legend. What looked like a compromise was really a war. Number 11. The highway scene. Almost killed Kevin McCarthy. The famous highway scene where Miles runs between speeding cars was one of the most dangerous moments ever filmed for a low-budget picture. Kevin McCarthy had to dodge real traffic on a real road. There were no special effects, no controlled environment, no safety nets. Just an actor, a camera crew, and vehicles driven by people who had no idea a movie was being made. The scene was shot guerrilla style on Highway 101 near Los Angeles. Siegel positioned his camera on the shoulder of the road. McCarthy waited for a break in traffic, then ran into the lanes, screaming his warning at approaching vehicles. Some drivers slowed down in confusion, others swerved to avoid him. A few kept going at full speed, missing McCarthy by inches. It was reckless and foolish. It was also brilliant. The terror on McCarthy's face during those shots is completely genuine. He wasn't acting scared. He was scared. Each take could have been his last. The exhaustion in his voice wasn't performance. He had been running and screaming for hours. When you watch that scene today, remember there were no stunt coordinators, no closed road, no digital trickery. Just one determined actor risking his life for his art. The rawness of that moment elevates the entire film. McCarthy survived without injury, though he later admitted he was lucky. What looked like movie magic was actually controlled chaos. Number 10. The film reflected Cold War paranoia. Invasion of the Body Snatchers arrived in American theaters during one of the most paranoid periods in the nation's history. The Cold War was at its height. Senator Joseph McCarthy, no relation to the star, had recently terrorized the country with accusations of communist infiltration. Americans were taught to fear their neighbors. Anyone could be a secret enemy. The film captured this anxiety perfectly, though different viewers interpreted it different ways. Some saw the pod people as a metaphor for communism, emotionless conformists who destroyed individuality and replaced it with collective obedience. The fear that your friends might secretly be working against you felt very real in 1956. Others saw the opposite message. The pod people represented the forces of conformity and suspicion themselves. The pressure to be like everyone else. The danger of a society where thinking differently could make you a target. Don Siegel later said he didn't intend any specific political message. He simply wanted to make a scary movie about the loss of humanity. But great art often reflects its time whether the artist intends it or not. Invasion of the Body Snatchers became a cultural touchstone because it expressed fears that Americans couldn't openly discuss. The movie gave those fears a shape, a terrifying shape with empty eyes and no emotion. Whatever your politics, the film's central horror remained universal. What if the people you trust aren't who they seem? That question never gets old. Number 9. Daniel Mainwaring wrote the script in isolation. Screenwriter Daniel Mainwaring faced a unique challenge adapting Jack Finney's story. He needed to condense a serialized novel into a tight 90-minute screenplay. He needed to make the science fiction elements believable, and he needed to do it all under pressure, with the studio constantly changing requirements. Mainwaring was already an experienced writer, known for film noir classics like Out of the Past in 1947. He understood how to build tension through dialogue and character. But science fiction was new territory for him. He retreated to work alone, studying Finney's original text carefully. The novel had a more relaxed pace, with extended passages describing the pods and their victims. Mainwaring had to streamline everything while keeping the emotional core intact. He focused on Miles and Becky's relationship as the heart of the story. Their love gave audiences something to root for. Their eventual separation gave the film its devastating power. Mainwaring also wrote dialogue that sounded natural, not like typical sci-fi speeches. His characters talked like real people, not scientists explaining plot points to each other. This grounded approach made the fantastic elements more believable. When ordinary people described impossible things, audiences accepted them. The script went through multiple revisions as the studio demanded changes. But Mainwaring's fundamental structure survived. His lonely work in isolation created the blueprint for a masterpiece. One writer, one typewriter, one terrifying vision. Number 8. The film's budget forced creative solutions. With less than $400,000 to spend, every creative decision required resourcefulness. Don Siegel couldn't afford elaborate sets, so he used real locations. He couldn't afford expensive lighting setups, so he embraced shadows and darkness. He couldn't afford famous actors, so he found talented unknowns who delivered exceptional performances. This limited budget actually improved the film. Siegel had to think carefully about every shot. He couldn't waste film on unnecessary coverage. He had to know exactly what he wanted before calling action. The result was lean, efficient storytelling with no padding or filler. The special effects team worked miracles with minimal resources. The pod transformations used simple practical techniques, lighting changes, makeup, and careful editing. The alien vegetables were created from cheap materials that somehow looked otherworldly on camera. Even the music was economical. Carmen Dragon's score used a small orchestra effectively, creating atmosphere without overwhelming the images. Simple themes repeated throughout the film, building dread through repetition rather than spectacle. Today, Hollywood spends hundreds of millions on science fiction epics filled with computer-generated imagery. Most of those films are forgotten within months. Invasion of the Body Snatchers was made for pocket change and remains relevant decades later. Sometimes limitations aren't obstacles, they're opportunities. Creativity flourishes when resources are scarce. Number 7. The kiss scene. Had hidden meaning. There's a kiss in Invasion of the Body Snatchers that means more than it appears. When Miles and Becky finally share an intimate moment, it represents everything the pod people want to destroy. Love, passion, human connection, the warmth of another person's touch. Don Siegel filmed this scene with unusual tenderness for a science fiction movie. The camera lingers on their faces. The lighting is soft. For just a moment, the horror falls away, and we see two people who genuinely care for each other. This makes Becky's eventual transformation even more devastating. Kevin McCarthy and Dana Wynter worked carefully to make their chemistry feel authentic. They discussed their characters' history, their hopes, their fears. By the time cameras rolled, they understood Miles and Becky as real people, not just roles in a B-movie. The kiss also carries subtle commentary about 1950s America. During this era, romantic expression was often suppressed. Society expected restraint and propriety. The pod people represent the ultimate suppression, complete emotional emptiness. Miles and Becky's passion is literally what keeps them human. It's what the invaders want to eliminate. When Becky becomes a pod person, one of the first things that changes is her response to Miles's touch. She feels nothing. The woman who kissed him with genuine warmth is gone forever. A simple romantic moment becomes a tragedy. That kiss was goodbye. They just didn't know it yet. Number 6. Carolyn Jones delivered unforgettable terror. Before she became famous as Morticia Addams on television, Carolyn Jones appeared in Invasion of the Body Snatchers as Teddy. Her character discovers one of the pods growing in her basement and provides some of the film's most genuinely frightening moments. Jones had a gift for conveying fear without overacting. Her eyes went wide, her voice trembled, but she never screamed hysterically or threw herself around. The terror was internal, which made it even more disturbing. The scene where Teddy first sees the pod is masterfully performed. She's initially confused, then curious, then slowly horrified as she realizes what she's looking at. Jones made audiences feel that same gradual shift from confusion to understanding to pure dread. Don Siegel recognized her talent and gave her close-ups that let her face tell the story. In a film full of memorable moments, her performance stands out. She would go on to receive an Academy Award nomination for The Bachelor Party the following year. Her role in The Addams Family made her a household name in the 1960s. But fans of Invasion of the Body Snatchers remember her for those terrifying minutes in a basement. A woman confronting the impossible. A performer showing the world what she could do. Teddy's fear was Carolyn Jones's gift. Number 5. The film inspired generations of horror. Invasion of the Body Snatchers didn't just entertain audiences, it changed the entire genre of horror and science fiction. Before this film, most monster movies featured external threats: giant ants, radioactive dinosaurs, aliens with ray guns. The terror came from outside, something you could fight with weapons and military might. This film introduced a different kind of fear. The enemy wasn't something you could see coming. It lived next door. It wore your family's face. It spoke with your loved one's voice. You couldn't fight it with tanks or bombs because you couldn't be sure who the enemy was until it was too late. This concept influenced countless films that followed. John Carpenter's The Thing in 1982 explored similar themes of identity and trust. The Stepford Wives in 1975 imagined perfect suburban robots replacing real women. Countless alien invasion stories borrowed the idea of enemies that look exactly like us. The film also established pods and body duplication as horror staples. Whenever you see a movie about clones replacing humans, you're watching something that began here. The DNA of Invasion of the Body Snatchers runs through decades of scary movies. 3 official remakes have been produced in 1978, 1993, and 2007. Each generation returns to this story because its fears remain timeless. The original 1956 version started something that never stopped. One movie became a legacy. Number 4. The film almost had a different title. Before settling on Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the production went through several title changes. Early drafts called it simply The Body Snatchers, matching Jack Finney's original novel. But the studio worried this sounded too much like a grave-robbing story. They wanted something that conveyed the science fiction element more clearly. Other titles were considered and rejected. Sleep No More was proposed, emphasizing the danger of falling asleep around the pods. Better Off Dead was briefly discussed, though this seemed too morbid even for a horror film. They Came from Another World was suggested, but felt too generic. Eventually, someone proposed adding Invasion to the beginning. Invasion of the Body Snatchers had rhythm and punch. It told audiences exactly what kind of movie to expect. The word invasion carried Cold War implications that would resonate with 1950s audiences. Body Snatchers sounded suitably creepy and mysterious. The title worked on multiple levels: literal alien invasion and the more frightening invasion of individual identity. Don Siegel reportedly wasn't enthusiastic about the longer title. He preferred something simpler and more ambiguous. But he was overruled by marketing concerns. In retrospect, the studio made the right call. Invasion of the Body Snatchers has become one of the most recognizable titles in film history. Try imagining the movie called anything else. It just doesn't feel right. The perfect title for the perfect horror. Number 3. Kevin McCarthy's warning became iconic. "They're here already. You're next. You're next." These words, screamed by Kevin McCarthy at the film's climax, became one of cinema's most famous warnings. The line wasn't in the original script, at least not in that exact form. McCarthy and Siegel developed it together during filming, crafting the precise wording that would maximize impact. McCarthy's delivery was crucial. He didn't just say the words, he screamed them with absolute conviction. His voice cracked from exhaustion, his face contorted with desperate urgency. He looked directly at the camera, breaking the fourth wall to address the audience themselves. We weren't just watching Miles warn strangers, he was warning us. This moment transcended the film itself. It became a cultural reference point, quoted and parodied countless times. When the 1978 remake was produced, they brought McCarthy back for a cameo. He reprised the same scene, running down another highway, still screaming his warning after more than 20 years. The warning works because it's so primal. Miles has seen the truth. He knows what's coming, and nobody will listen. Every person who has ever tried to warn others about a coming disaster and been ignored can relate to that frustration. The line captures the essence of the entire film in just a few words. They're already here. You're next. Simple, terrifying, unforgettable. Number 2. The transformation scene still haunts viewers. The moment when Becky becomes a pod person is considered one of the most disturbing scenes in classic horror. Miles and Becky have been running all night. They're exhausted beyond measure. They find a hiding place and collapse together. Miles tells Becky he loves her. She tells him she loves him too. Then she closes her eyes for just a moment. Just one moment of sleep. When she opens her eyes again, everything has changed. Dana Wynter played this transformation with chilling subtlety. There's no dramatic music, no special effects, just a slight shift in her expression. The warmth leaves her eyes. Her voice becomes flat and mechanical. She looks at Miles, the man she loves, like he's a stranger. Then she screams to alert the other pod people. Kevin McCarthy's reaction is equally devastating. You can see his heart breaking in real time. The woman he's fought to protect is gone. The body remains, but Becky has been erased. His grief is overwhelming, mixed with horror and disbelief. Siegel filmed the scene in a single take, capturing every subtle moment without cutting away. The camera holds on their faces as the horror unfolds. There's nowhere to hide from the emotional devastation. This scene works because we've grown to love these characters. We've watched them struggle together. We've rooted for their survival. And then, in one quiet instant, everything is lost. That wasn't just acting. That was tragedy, captured on film forever. Number 1. The film asks one eternal question. At its core, invasion of the body. Snatchers poses a question that haunts every viewer long after the credits roll. What makes us human? The pod people aren't monsters in the traditional sense. They're perfect copies who feel no pain, no anger, no fear. They promise peace and contentment. No more worry, no more suffering, no more messy emotions to complicate your life. Wouldn't that be easier? The film suggests that our struggles are precisely what make us valuable. Our pain, our joy, our love, our fear, these aren't weaknesses to be eliminated. They're the essence of who we are. A life without emotion isn't peace. It's death while still breathing. Miles refuses to give up his humanity, even when the odds are hopeless. He keeps fighting because surrender means losing everything that matters. The ability to feel love for Becky, the desire to protect his community, the burning need to stay awake and stay himself. Don Siegel understood that the best horror films are really about something deeper than scares. They force us to examine our own values, our own fears, our own definition of what it means to be alive. Nearly 70 years later, audiences still watch this film and ask themselves, would I fight as hard as Miles did? Would I choose the comfort of becoming a pod person? Or would I hold on to my messy, painful, beautiful humanity until the very end? The answer reveals who we truly are. That's why this movie endures. It doesn't just frighten us, it defines us. Bonus fact: the lost subplot that would have changed everything. Deep in the production files of Invasion of the Body Snatchers lies evidence of a storyline that was planned but never filmed. Jack Finney's original novel included more details about where the pods came from and how they traveled through space. The screenplay initially contained scenes showing the pods drifting through the cosmos, seeking habitable planets across the galaxy. This would have given the invasion a larger context. Earth wasn't specifically targeted. We were just one stop on an endless journey of consumption. Don Siegel wanted to include a brief sequence showing pods floating past distant stars before arriving on Earth. He envisioned simple but haunting images of these organic vessels tumbling silently through the void. It would have emphasized the alien nature of the threat and suggested the invasion had happened countless times on countless worlds. Budget constraints made this impossible. There was no money for space effects, no matter how simple. The opening cosmic sequence was cut before filming began. Instead, the movie begins with Miles in the hospital, already in the middle of his story. Some film historians believe this loss actually improved the movie. By keeping the pod's origins mysterious, the film feels more immediate and personal. We never get a scientific explanation or a comfortable sense of understanding. The pods simply exist, and that's terrifying enough. But somewhere in an alternate universe, there's a version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers that begins among the stars. An opening shot of infinite darkness, seeds drifting toward a small blue planet, the beginning of the end. Some stories are better left untold. Mystery remains the greatest fear. Invasion of the Body Snatchers is more than a science fiction movie from the 1950s. It's a warning that never gets old. A love story that ends in tragedy, a meditation on what makes us human in a world that constantly pressures us to conform. Don Siegel made this film with almost no money and almost no time. His cast and crew worked themselves to exhaustion. They filmed on real streets with real traffic, risking safety for their art. They crafted alien pods from scraps and turned a small California town into a battleground for humanity's soul. What they created transcends its era. Every generation rediscovers this story because its fears remain our fears. We still worry about losing ourselves. We still wonder if the people around us are who they claim to be. we still fight to preserve our individuality in a world that rewards sameness. Miles Bennell kept screaming his warning even when nobody listened. Maybe that's the bravest thing any of us can do. Keep telling the truth. Keep feeling deeply. Keep refusing to become someone else's idea of normal. If you enjoyed these stories, subscribe for more. Every movie hides a truth, and we'll keep uncovering them, one story at a time. Stay curious, stay human, and whatever you do, don't fall asleep.